Hello again, everybody. Doug Marola, the freelance teacher, education-ny.blogspot.com and thefreelanceteacher.teachable.com. We're in the Odyssey, Book 12, and there are a couple of reasons why I'm using this one as an early lesson for the Odyssey. One of the main reasons is to show high school students and some middle school students that the Odyssey still has a lot of relevance. Even though it's thousands of years old, there are things in it that really are lessons in class. And one of the things that I've always told students is that, especially when reading the Odyssey, although I try to do this with everything, we're looking at human nature. We're looking at and analyzing how will humans behave, what have people told you for thousands of years, and what is this great conversation that's been going on for millennia. And what are they saying to us? What can you learn? Think about it this way. If you were in a world like ancient Greece, it doesn't have to be ancient Greece, could be anybody, but let's just stick with ancient Greece because we're in the Odyssey. You're at the amphitheater. It's the only time you have any downtime because you're herding goats or working on the farm or trying to be a stonemason or something. And now all of a sudden at the end of the week, you have a chance to not only be entertained, but also to have something taught perhaps to someone younger, your children or a nephew or a niece. So these tales were really more than just let's sit around the campfire and be entertained. They're deeper than that. And you have to always ask yourself, why is it such that even after thousands of years, we still read the Odyssey? And I'll tell you what, I'm in the bad neighborhood school, and I get more mileage out of the Odyssey than the politically correct foolishness that my overlords try to tell me is better to work with young people. The Odyssey, forget about it. I see students from the old days, and they remember the Odyssey. They don't remember a lot of the other stuff. And so I think it's worth your time, and the stuff in it is valuable. Now I'm going to go through some of the text. We're not going to cover all of Book 12, simply because there's too much. So we're not going to go into who Circe is very, very deeply. The sirens, we're not going to touch on them, and some of the secondary things we won't touch on. But we will take a look at Circe talking to Odysseus, and I will cover some of the text with you now in class. So we have Book 12, and you see here I put X11. Whoops, that's a little bit of a typo there, but too late. We've already started. So Odysseus is speaking with Circe. Now, Circe's name is something to look into. If you look at the origin, the etymology of the word church, you go back to the ancient Greek spelling of Circe, which would be Kirke. Also is similar to the Scottish name Kirk. And Circe also then becomes the root word of church. And when you look at Circe as a I don't know if leader is the right word, but Circe turns Odysseus' crew into animals. And she's the leader. She's the leader of the flock. She's the leader of the herd. And it sure is strange that you have such a connection between church and Circe. And go look up the etymology. Go look up where the word church comes from. And it's interesting you have this leader-flock dynamic with her name and as a goddess. So it's a strange thing when you go back and research where the words come from themselves. But Circe is telling Odysseus in Book 12 what he's going to need to do to get home, right? Because he went down to the underworld and spoke with the blind prophet Tiresias, and now he's back. And so she says, okay, well, here's the other stuff you got to do. We'll go follow these directions, and here's the text for this part, this first main lesson. It says, 3 times a day, in the day, does she vomit forth her waters, talking about Charybdis. And 3 times she sucks them down again. See that you be not there when she is sucking. For if you are, Neptune, Poseidon, himself could not save you. You must hug the Scylla side and drive ship by as fast as you can. for you had better lose 6 men than your whole crew. And what she's talking about is Scylla, the 6-headed monstrous beast goddess on the left side, or 3 times a day, the Charybdis, the monstrous female monster who devours entire ships at a time and will drag you down in the water vortex and destroy you and everybody. And look at what Odysseus says. He says, "Is there no way," said I, "of escaping Charybdis and at the same time keeping Scylla off when she's trying to harm my men?" "You daredevil," replied the goddess, "you are always wanting to fight somebody or something. You will not let yourself be beaten even by the immortals. For Scylla is not mortal. Moreover, she is savage, extreme, rude, cruel, and invincible. There is no help for it. Your best chance will be to get by her as fast as ever you can, for if you dawdle about her rock while you are putting on your armor, she may catch you with a second cast of her 6 heads and snap up another half-dozen of your men. So drive your ship past her at full speed and roar out lustily to Kirke, who is Scylla's dam, Scylla's mother. Bad luck to her. She will then stop her from making a second raid upon you." So look at what Odysseus says up here, right? Is there any way, right, that I can avoid Charybdis and at the same time avoid Scylla? And that's really a lesson that is key, because you have a bad choice and a worse choice. And that's really one of the main lessons between Scylla and Charybdis, right? Because what happens is students want exactly what Odysseus wants. They're like, well, wait a minute. If I go on the left side of this channel as I sail home, I'm going to lose 6 people guaranteed. Or if I go on the right side, the Charybdis side, I lose everyone. I'm going to lose the entire boat. And students, just like Odysseus, say, well, wait a minute. What's the third choice? And there really is no third choice. As a matter of fact, without being too blunt about it, there is no third choice, not really or otherwise. Right? Students are always asking for a third choice, and I tell them, look, Pinkie Pie, Applejack, and Rainbow Dash are not going to come in through the window and see to it that you're made whole, and they're going to poop out Skittles so that you can have a tasty treat and taste the rainbow and feel better about yourself. There is no choice C. It's Scylla, you're going to lose 6, or Charybdis, everyone. And Odysseus decides internally that he's going to, well, do the logical thing, which is 6, rather than everybody. It makes sense. And then, so they go and they talk to, they go and, you know, they talk to Circe, and they set sail, they deal with the sirens, and there's other stuff going on. But when they get to the island, this is how the Odyssey rolls it. Immediately after we had got past the island, I saw a great wave from which spray was rising, and I heard a loud roaring sound. The men were so frightened that they loosed hold of their oars, for the whole sea resounded with the rushing of the waters. But the ship stayed where it was, for the men had left off rowing. I went round, therefore, and exhorted them, man by man, not to lose heart. And so they're scared. And you can see the metaphorical Scylla that Odysseus knows of. This thing that we go a little bit, we go there, we lose a little bit, it's violent and terrible, or everybody. So he's like, you know, it's scary, and he's got to go around and lead his men down the straight and narrow. "My friend," said I, "this is not the first time that we've been in danger, and we are in nothing like so bad a case as when the Cyclops shut us up in his cave. Nevertheless, my courage and wise counsel saved us then, and we shall live to look back on all this as well. Now, therefore, let us all do as I say, trust in Jove, and row on with might and main. As for you, coxswain, these are your orders. Attend to them, for the ship is in your hands. Turn her head away from these steaming rapids and hug the rock, or she will give you the slip and be over yonder before you know where you are. You will be the death of us." So Odysseus is cheering on his men. He's also telling the coxswain, the guy who steers, you hug the left side of the strait so that the right side, where we see all this scary, crazy stuff, doesn't devour us, and you will, if you go to the right, you will kill us all. Now look at the next part. I've highlighted it for us. So they did as I told them, but I said nothing about the awful monster Scylla, for I knew the men would not on rowing if I did, but would huddle together in the hold. And think about that. He doesn't tell his crew that 6 of them are going to die, because he knows if he does, they're not going to row. They're not going to move forward. They would be paralyzed by fear, and that's normal. And Odysseus, as a leader, has to hide information from his crew as little as he may. He doesn't like the information. He doesn't like the situation he's in. He doesn't want to hide from his crew the bad stuff that's coming. But he doesn't really have a choice, does he? What's he supposed to do? Tell them? He knows for sure, as you and I know, that they would just stop. So he doesn't. He does the smart thing, but unpleasant thing, right? And that's the key, isn't it? Because the unpleasant thing with Scylla, that's unpleasant. You're going to lose 6. And one of them might even be you. But it's better than losing everybody and the boat. And that's kind of a life lesson, isn't it? Because there are things, we're tempted as people, and we can go off the rails. We can get distracted. Now, is it better to be distracted by things that might harm you a little bit? Or should you go whole hog into hedonism and chaos and monstrous, terrible behavior? You go all in, or maybe you're tempted a little bit, right? You don't like either one. Tempted, if in religious terms, tempted by sin, right? You're going to sin a little bit. We're tempted by that, right? And we know maybe we should do the right thing, not the wrong thing. But there's also the idea, well, say, screw it. I'm going to go all the way. I'm going to have no holds barred, and I'm just going to go and become a complete hedonistic wild moron and go completely over the edge. And that's this Charybdis-Scylla mix, where that's our fight internally. That's us all the time. And that's what Scylla and Charybdis pretty much represent. And you've got to get through that. And you're telling this to your 10-year-old son after listening to the poet Homer tell the story. And you're explaining. That's the lesson you're telling. Yes, it's interesting to see a 6-headed monster with big teeth and, destruction, and Scylla with the spuming water. And we'll go through that. Now we'll hear the entertaining part. But the lesson is key, and it works. And that's why these things last as long as they do. So let's go back up here and finish out the section. In one thing, remember, Circe told him not to put on his armor. In one thing only did I disobey Circe's strict instructions. I put on my armor. Then, seizing 2 strong spears, I took my stand on the ship's bows, for it was there that I expected to see the monster of the rock, who was to do my men so much harm. But I could not make her out anywhere, though I strained my eyes with looking the gloomy rock all over and over. Then we entered the straits in great fear of mind. For on the one hand was Scylla, and on the other the dread Charybdis kept sucking up the salt water. As she vomited it up, it was like the water in a cauldron when it is boiling over upon a great fire, and the spray reached the top of the rocks on either side. When she began to suck again, we could see the water all inside whirling round and round, and it made a deafening sound as it broke against the rocks. We could see the bottom of the whirlpool all black with sand and mud, and the men were at their wits' end for fear. While we were taken up with this, and were expecting each moment to be our last, Scylla pounced down suddenly upon us and snatched up my 6 best men. I was looking at once over both ship and men, and in a moment I saw their hands and feet ever so high above me, struggling in the air as Scylla was carrying them off. And I heard them call out my name in one last despairing cry. As a fisherman seated, spear in hand, upon some jutting rock, throws bait into the water to deceive the poor little fishes, and spears them with the ox's horn with which his spear is shod, throwing them gasping onto the land as he catches them one by one. Even so did Scylla land these panting creatures on her rock, and munch them up at the mouth of her den, while they screamed and stretched out their hands to me in their mortal agony. This was the most sickening sight that I saw throughout all my voyages. And it's easy when going through the Odyssey to see Odysseus as kind of heartless at times or callous. And he's not. He cares about his crew, even though they're dundering, clownish, short-sighted, ignorant, and foolish much of the time. This image of them screaming and crying is the thing that bothered him the most. And look at this part up here, last bit for today. They were gawking at and looking at the Charybdis with the whirlpool of water, sand and mud, water spraying up in the sound, making a huge deafening sound, crashing up against the rocks. And they're watching that. And that's when Scylla strikes. And not only is it when you are distracted, right? In this case, when the crew is distracted, Scylla pounces by surprise when they're distracted. But not only that, look at what it says. Pounce down suddenly upon us and snatch up my 6 best men. Isn't that how it always goes? Isn't that how it seems to be? Not just 6, not just any old 6. 6 best. And so that's the irony of life a lot of times. You're going to lose 6. Circe didn't say you're going to lose 6 of your best men. Circe said you'll lose 6. And here you see in the image, right, this idea of the Scylla here with the dog heads. Sometimes that's how she's presented. And Charybdis, this kind of odd-looking monster, spewing, open, gaping mouth. But the key is the lesson, isn't it? Because oftentimes that's a life lesson. You're going to take some losses, and okay, well, maybe I'll get away with something, maybe I'll, lose a little bit, but here you have Odysseus saying, okay, I'm going to lose 6, and the way it went down in the irony of life, which is why irony is such a key concept in English, you have Odysseus losing 6 of his best men. And not just 6 random guys, not the guy that's a pain, or the guy that plays bad music, or the one who sits in rows on the boat and farts all the time. 6 of his best guys. And that's the part that hurts. So not only is it those 6, but the image and the sound of them being ripped up out of the boat and crunched, and they're screaming, looking to him as their leader to save them, and he can't. And he's helpless, right? This is Odysseus, the guy who won the Trojan War, thought up the idea of the Trojan horse, came up with the idea and the ways to get them out of the Cyclops cave. And there isn't anything he can do about it. And that is arguably one of the best lessons of the Odyssey. Think about it. You have a military hero, a talented and intelligent fighter, won the Trojan War, a huge, huge victory. And he sees 6 of his guys pulled out of the boat by the monster Scylla, and he can't do anything about it. And that's kind of a lesson to us, isn't it? There are a lot of things you can control. I don't know about you, but I see people getting really bent out of shape, trying to control things that they cannot control, or getting uptight about it, worrying about things that you have no control over. You see it in sports, politics, economics, huge issues where you don't have a role and you don't have a say. And that's what was happening with Odysseus when he lost those 6 guys. The irony of those 6, right? Work backwards. The irony of those 6. The choice that it has to even be 6 because the other choice is worse. You have a bad choice and a terrible choice. All of these things, all of these difficulties you have to go through that Odysseus has to go through that probably are mirrored in the things that we have to go through. So think about those lessons. And the next time you hear someone talking about, all that old literature and, we need some modern stuff and that Western culture stuff, it's for the birds. Nothing there. Let's read something new that the New York Times recommends. Maybe you very quietly, because you can't control their thoughts, can you? You can't control the forces at work behind them. But you can control yourself and what you do read and what you do learn from and from whom you listen, or to whom you listen. Okay? So let's leave it at that. That's our 20-minute lesson. Doug Marola, TheFreelanceTeacher.teachable.com, and I'll talk to you next time.